Kevin surveyed the area with apprehension, searching for any indication of a spaceport or interstellar life, but to no avail. The trail veered off to one side, obstructed by the hills, and approached the sea at a distance from the city. A decent-sized sailboat was docked at the end of a stone pier, evidently awaiting their arrival. The hostages were bound hand and foot and roughly hurled into the ship's hold. Kevin squirmed until he could peer through a gap between two ill-fitting planks. He began to narrate a running commentary of their voyage, ostensibly for the benefit of his companions, but really for his own amusement. Our journey is nearly over, and ahead of us lies the ancient and romantic city of Borea. It's famous for its repulsive customs, savage inhabitants, and outdated sanitation facilities. The channel we're entering now seems to be the main sewer. Islands dot both sides of the channel. The small ones are covered in hovels that are so dilapidated that even the most basic animal burrows would appear grand in comparison. The larger islands are like forts, each one walled and fortified, presenting a hostile facade to the world. There cannot be so many forts in a town this size, so I surmise that each one is undoubtedly the protected stronghold of one of the tribes, groups, or clans that our friend Judas told us about. Look at these monuments to extreme selfishness and be warned. This is the end result of a system that starts with slave owners like the former Cha'aka and their armies of Krenoi crackers. It builds up through familiar hierarchies, such as the Sousa, and reaches its peak of depravity behind those walls. Absolute power still reigns, and every man is out for himself. The only way to advance is by stepping over the bodies of others. All scientific discoveries and inventions are treated as personal secrets, to be hidden and used only for personal gain. I have never seen such a level of human greed and selfishness. I must admit, though, that I admire Homo sapiens' ability to follow through on an idea, no matter how harmful it may be. As the ship lost momentum and the sails were furled, Kevin lost his balance and fell into the putrid bilge. As he made his way out, he muttered, "The descent of man." The ship came to a halt with much shouting and cursed orders as piles grated along the sides. The hatch above slid back, and the three captives were rushed to the deck. The ship was tied up to a dock in a pool of water, surrounded by buildings and high walls. A large sea gate behind them was just swinging shut, through which the ship had entered from the canal. They were pushed into a doorway and through halls and past guards until they ended up in a large central room. The room was unfurnished except for the dais at the far end, on which stood a large and rusty iron throne. The man on the throne, undoubtedly the Hertog person, sported a magnificent white beard and shoulder-length hair. His nose was round and red, his eyes blue and watery. He nibbled at a Krenoi impaled delicately on a two-tined iron fork. "Tell me," the Hertog suddenly shouted, "why should you not be killed at once?" "We are your slaves, Hertog, we are your slaves," everyone in the room shouted in unison, waving their hands in the air at the same time. Kevin missed the first chorus, but came in on the second. Only Arch did not join in the chant and wave, speaking instead in a solitary voice after the Pledge of Allegiance was completed. "I am no man's slave." The commander of the soldiers swung his thick bow in a short arc that terminated on the top of Arch's head. He dropped, stunned, to the floor. "You have a new slave, O Hertog," the commander said. "Which is the one who knows the secrets of the Karoi?" the Hertog asked, and Kotze pointed at Kevin. Kotze pointed to Kevin and declared, "Him there, O mightiness! He can make Karoi, and he can make the monster that burns and moves them. I know because I watched him do it. He created the balls of fire that engulfed the Sousa and many other things. I brought him here to serve as your slave so that he could fashion Karoi for the Personoi. These are the remnants of the Karoi we traveled in after it was consumed by its own flames." He emptied the tools and charred fragments onto the floor, causing the Hertog to sneer at them. "What evidence is this?" he demanded, turning to Kevin. "These objects are meaningless. Slave, how can you prove to me that you can do what he claims?" Kevin briefly pondered denying any knowledge of the situation, which would be a satisfying revenge against Kotze, who would surely meet a gruesome fate for causing all this trouble for nothing. However, he swiftly disregarded the idea, partly due to humanitarian reasons, as Kotze couldn't help being who he was, but mostly because he had no desire to be subjected to questioning. He knew nothing about the local torture methods and wanted to keep it that way. Providing proof is simple, Hertog of all the personoi, because I know everything about everything. I can construct machines that walk, talk, run, fly, swim, bark like a dog, and roll on their backs. Will you build a karoi for me? The Hertog inquired. If you have the appropriate tools that I can use, it could be arranged. However, I must first know what your clan's specialty is, if you understand what I mean. For instance, the Trezeligoi create karoi and the Sousa extract oil. What is your people's expertise? You cannot know as much as you claim if you are unaware of the personoi's accomplishments. I come from a far-off land, and as you know, news travels slowly around these parts. Not among the personoi, the Hertog scoffed, pounding his chest. We can communicate across the breadth of the country and always know the location of our adversaries. We possess the power to transfer magic through wires, capable of both destruction and illumination, or even to disarm an enemy with a mere thought, he boasted. It appears your gang has the monopoly on electricity, which is good news. If you have access to heavy forging equipment... But before Kevin could finish his thought, the Hertog interrupted. Stop! Everyone out except for the Sioloj, not the new slave. He stays here, he commanded, as the soldiers snatched Kevin's arm. The room cleared, leaving only a handful of seasoned men, each adorned with a sunburst decoration on their chest. They were undoubtedly skilled in the art of electricity, and they brandished their weapons, glaring at Kevin with hostility. The Hertog motioned for him to proceed. You used a sacred word. Who revealed it to you? Speak quickly or face death, the Hertog demanded. Didn't I tell you I knew everything? I can build a karoi, and given a little time, I can improve on your electrical works, assuming your technology is on par with the rest of this planet, Kevin retorted. The Hertog leaned in. Do you know what lies behind the forbidden portal? He asked, pointing to a locked and guarded door at the far end of the room. There is no way you could have seen what lies beyond it, but if you can tell me what it is, then I will believe you are the wizard you claim to be. Kevin rolled his eyes. I have a strange feeling that I've been over this before. Fine, I'll indulge you. You, people, make electricity, most likely through chemical means, though it's doubtful that you'd generate enough power that way. Therefore, you must have a generator of some sort. It would be a large magnet made of a special iron that can attract other iron, and you spin it around quickly next to some coils of wire. And Viola, you have electricity. You transmit this through copper wire to your devices, but I doubt you have many. You claim to talk across the country, but I suspect you only send clicks, dots, and dashes, Kevin stated confidently. The adepts shuffled their feet and murmured in response, indicating that Kevin had hit close to home. But I have an idea. What if I were to invent the telephone? Instead of the old-fashioned clickety-clack, you could actually speak and hear someone on the other end of the wire. The Hertog's eyes gleamed with greed. It is said that this was possible in the past, but we have failed to achieve it. Can you truly do this? I can, but before I make any promises, I must see your equipment, Kevin replied, sensing the tension in the room. The adepts complained about secrecy, but their desire for wealth and power won out, and they allowed Kevin to enter the Holy of Holies. Two Sioloj, armed with daggers, flanked him as he approached. As he peered inside, he heard a sound that made his heart skip a beat. The human body may react quickly, but it still requires a finite amount of time to respond. Kevin's actions were not instantaneous, despite what the onlookers may have thought. To them, it appeared as if Kevin had vanished in a flurry of activity. With two swift blows of lightning, Kevin's guardians were sent tumbling to the ground. Before they could regain their footing, Kevin had already made his escape through the door, slamming it shut in their faces. However, the situation was far more intricate than what met the eye. As soon as the door opened, Kevin caught a glimpse of the room's interior. He saw a slave cranking a generator made of crude junk, with thick wires snaking across the room to a man who was pushing a wooden stick against some copper blades. Above his head, fat sparks were jumping between two brassy spheres. As if to complete the picture for a Bronze Age edition of First Steps in Electricity, another cable twisted up from the spark gap and disappeared out a small window. It was a crude and primitive way of generating a radio signal. In the blink of an eye, Kevin heard a sound that could have been mistaken for distant thunder, an earthquake, a volcano, or an enormous explosion. It rumbled and rolled, muffled by distance, yet still clear. Although it resembled none of these things to Kevin, it made him think of a high-altitude rocket or jet cutting through the atmosphere. The juxtaposition of these two events was intriguing to Kevin. The sight of a radio transmitter, no matter how crude, and the thought that there might be a civilized craft or some kind up there containing men who would come to his aid if he could only contact them, was an insane one. But even as he realized that fact, he bolted through the door and sealed it behind him. It could be that Kevin acted out of frustration, having been pushed around one too many times. Regardless of the reason, he had made his decision and was determined to follow through. The generator slave was startled when Kevin slammed the door, but quickly resumed cranking when Kevin glanced his way. The man working the transmitter was taken aback by the stranger's sudden appearance and reached for his dagger, but Kevin was too quick for him. With a few swift Pyrrhan fighting moves, Kevin incapacitated the man and began to tap out a message on the transmitter. SOS. SOS. He sent first, hoping that someone would hear his plea for help. He spelled everything out, repeating his name often and trying other themes to appeal for off-world aid. He knew the chances of his message being heard were slim, but he had hope. He continued tapping away as the slave cranked away until the old guard in the other room broke down the door. Kevin stopped tapping and turned to face the furious Hertug, rubbing his tired wrist. "Your equipment works fine, though it could use a lot of improvements," he said calmly. "Kill him! Kill!" the Hertug screamed. "Your communication system will be destroyed if you kill me, along with any chance you have of obtaining all of the industrial secrets at once," Kevin warned, scanning the room for a heavy object to use as a weapon. Suddenly, a massive explosion shook the room, and a crack formed in one of the walls, causing dust to rain down from the ceiling. The sound of gunfire could be heard in the distance. "It worked!" Kevin exclaimed with unbridled excitement. He then hurled a large roll of wire at the men in the doorway, catching them off guard, and dove headfirst after it. Chaos erupted as he made his way through the room, using his boots to inflict damage and create a path of escape. The men pursued him as war broke out around them, with gunfire and explosions filling the air. Soldiers ran in a panic through the dust, trying to make sense of the situation. Kevin kept running, a club in hand, until he burst through a wall and tumbled out onto the open ground next to a dock. There, he found a spaceship's lifeboat, still glowing from its descent, and Boba standing next to it, firing her gun. She had been in orbit over the planet for a month, monitoring dozens of radio transmitters in hopes of hearing from Kevin. "What were you waiting for?" she snapped. "I've been waiting for you to contact me for a month now. I've been monitoring all of the radio transmitters on this continent." Boba fired at some bowmen who had foolishly appeared on an upper story, then ran to Kevin with tears in her eyes. "Oh, my love, I was so worried," she said, embracing him tightly with her grenade-throwing arm and kissing him passionately. As she performed the task at hand, her eyes remained open, but she only needed to pull the trigger once. Suddenly a voice called out, and Chris emerged, assisting the still disoriented Arch. "Who's this?" Boba demanded, her voice once again cold as ice. "Oh, just someone I know," Kevin replied, his smile insincere. "You should recognize him. He's the one who arrested me." Without hesitation, Boba handed Kevin a gun. "You'll want to kill him yourself." Kevin accepted the weapon, but instead of using it on the man before him, he used it to clear a nearby rooftop. The powerful kick of the Pyrrhan automatic was like a gentle caress on his hand. "I don't think I want to kill him," Kevin stated. "He actually saved my life once, even though he's tried to take it from me several times since then. Let's go upstairs to the ship, and I'll tell you all about it. We can find a better spot to chat than this." Chapter 12. Kevin slumped into the plush seat, feeling rejuvenated after a good meal and a few drinks. He reflected on how much he had taken for granted the simple pleasures in life. "You don't realize what you have until it's gone," he mused. Turning to Boba, he reached out to take her hand, but she quickly withdrew it and continued typing on the computer. Kevin attempted to break the silence. "So, how did you manage to find me?" Boba didn't look up from her work. "It was quite simple, really. We traced the markings on the ship that took you and backtracked its course. We found 3 possible planets that it could have landed on. 2 of them were modern and would have reported the ship's arrival, but they didn't. Therefore, it must have landed on the planet we just left. Upon arrival, the first order of business was to locate one of the radios and send a message, and that's exactly what was done. Who is she? The question was delivered in a decidedly icy tone, leaving no room for confusion as to who she referred to. It could only be Chris, who was currently huddled across the room, visibly distressed and wide-eyed with fear at the prospect of traveling through space with a group of individuals who spoke a language she didn't understand. "I've told you before, she's just a friend," Kevin explained. "She was with us, and even helped us. I couldn't just leave her behind to return to a life in the desert. It's far too brutal for anyone to endure. There's an entire planet full of slaves back there, and while I can't save them all, I can at least take out the one person who would rather see me live than die." Boba's response was predictably cold. "What do you intend to do with her?" Kevin had already given that question a great deal of thought. If Chris was going to have any chance of survival, she needed to be removed from the deadly threat of female Piran jealousy as soon as possible. "We'll stop at the next civilized planet and let her off. I have enough money to leave a deposit in a bank that will last her for years. I'll make sure it's paid out in small amounts, so even if she's cheated, she'll still have enough to get by. I'm not going to worry about her. If she was able to survive in the Krenoi Legion, she can make it anywhere on a settled world." He knew there would be complaints when he broke the news to Chris, but it was for her own good. "I shall care for and lead her in the paths of righteousness," a voice spoke from the doorway. Arch stood there, holding onto the doorframe and sporting a turban of bandages on his head. Kevin eagerly agreed with the plan. He turned to Chris and spoke in her native tongue. "Did you hear that? Arch will take care of you and provide for your needs. I'll make sure you get some money, and he'll explain what it is. Listen to him carefully, but do the opposite of what he says. Promise me you'll do that and never break your word. That way you may make mistakes, but things will go smoothly most of the time." Chris cried out, "I can't leave you. Take me with you. I'll be your slave forever." Boba, catching some of the meaning, asked, "What did she say?" "Kevin, you're evil," Arch declared, falling back into his usual routine. "She'll always obey you no matter what I do." "I hope so," Kevin said fervently. "Your way of thinking is illogical. The rest of us are happier living in the physical world and enjoying life." "You're evil," Arch repeated, pulling out a pistol he had found. "I'm taking control of this ship. Secure the women so they can't cause trouble. We're heading to Cassilia for your trial." Boba had her back turned away from Arch as she sat in the control chair, her hands full of navigational notes. She slowly lifted her head and caught sight of Kevin, a smile spreading across her face. "You once said you didn't want him killed," she said. "I still don't want him killed, but I have no intention of going to Cassilia," he replied, returning her smile before turning away. A sudden rush of feet behind him caught his attention. No gunfire erupted, but a hoarse scream, a thud, and a sharp cracking sound suggested that Arch had lost his final argument. The end.
And this concludes War Machinery, a science fiction novel, written by Marcel Hammond. Visit brooksaudiobooks.com for updates on the availability of new books and a special free offer.